I was trying to come up with an illustration of the idea of boundaries, identity, intimacy, and so forth. So because I lived in California and had a ranch at the time, I thought ranch was a good idea. Now I would probably do this and it would be a farm. But it was a ranch. But I want you to notice this first illustration that you have that is above the words nobody home. Do you see that, nobody home? That illustration above it, it would be my illustration of a healthy ranch, a good, healthy, working, productive ranch. Now, what would you notice about this ranch? Now, we're going to use the ranch as meaning me. Ready? I mean you. It's about us. The ranch has a very clearly designated fence. There's a place where this is on my ranch, and this is not on my ranch. You got it? You got that so far? Okay. Now, there's a gate, and it's a good gate, and what you're going to notice is that's a swinging gate. Okay? That gate swings, and it can swing what direction? Closed. Okay? Now, what you'll notice on the ranch that I put are several things. Right at the core of it is identity. Okay? The main house on a person's ranch is identity. Am I losing you in the illustration, or are you getting it? Okay? That's the main part of the ranch. Then what you're going to see is there's a well, which represents the person's spiritual life. There are outbuildings, which represent gifts, talents, abilities. There are trees that represent the fruits. There are crops. And then you'll notice that it's not completely without problems. There's a few snake pits here, and there's some weeds. But this is basically what a healthy ranch looks like. Now, this is the job of a parent. The job of a parent when a child is born is to begin to lay, hear this, the foundation of this ranch. The foundations. So the parent lays the foundations of identity. How do they do that? By the way they look at you, by the blessings they give to you. They begin to lay the foundations of your identity. Okay, the way they respond to you. The parent should be laying the foundation. Do you hear me keep using the word foundation? The foundation of the child's relationship with God. The parent should be helping the child discover. But as the parent and this child grow, there comes a point in which the job of the parent is to equip the child to attend to this by themselves. Okay? That it's no longer the parent's job, it's the child's job. And for a season, the role of the parent is to make sure they're understanding what the nature of this job is. All the while, the healthy parent knows this. There's a time when I have to what? Get off the ranch. And then I've got to teach the child how to stand at the gate to know who should I let on and who should I not let on to my ranch. Okay? And by ranch, it means the essence of who I am. Okay? And so then at a certain time, the child has learned, not only is this my responsibility, but they've learned, and they'll learn this both positively and by mistakes, who can I trust to at times be invited on my ranch to help me better understand how to, okay, build my main house, develop my spiritual life, experience my, but the whole time they let them on there, if they're healthy, they know what? That's right, you're visiting. And when I ask you to leave, you're leaving. And you don't get on unless I ask you to come on. And so this role of the parent is very, very important. How do I raise up identity? Okay, how do I lay that foundation and so forth? So once a person's reaching a certain level of maturity, they realize this is my responsibility. I can't say, I don't have a rich spiritual life because of you. You see? And this is congregational wide. I mean, how many times have you ever been in a church where people say something, this pastor's just not feeding me? Do you realize just how sideways that thought is? You're 65 years old. The pastor's not feeding you? No, that's just not the way this is supposed to work. So we have a ranch. That ranch has a boundaries. There's a place my ranch ends and your ranch begins, and vice versa. And once I reach this stage, I'm responsible. Okay? So just ask this. Who's responsible for Terry Wardle's spiritual life? That's right. What about his identity? Are you getting this? What about the use and development of his gifts? You keep getting. If it's Terry Wardle's ranch, it's Terry Wardle's responsibility. But if Terry Wardle is also at least a little bit mature, he knows I get stuck sometimes. So I'm going to ask a friend would you come? Show me how you do this. That friend could be a book that I'm reading. That friend could be a pastor. That friend could be a friend. But in the bottom line, it's whose responsibility? That's right. It's mine. Now, are there any questions about that? I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'll get back to Nathan's question. There comes a time in all of our lives when we need someone like a father, and at times a mother, but I'm speaking specifically to a father, to bless into us, okay, the recognition that you're a wonder. And I know you can do it. And I see in you things you can't even dream about. A father needs to say to his daughter, you are stunning. You're absolutely stunning. You have brought into my world more life than you will ever imagine. And that father's blessing, if it's truly given, stays with them the rest of their lives. And when some whisper of I can't comes in, there's a neural pathway that says, oh yes, I can. Okay? You follow? Now, but what's happened for many of us is we're starting to say, I hate this table. I don't want to be part of this table. But I'm so drawn to this table. There's a part of this issue right here that I'm going to get to with this ranch is we're missing at least one thing. The episodic experience of someone standing on behalf of God as a father figure and say, you have no idea what I see. And I bless you with the wonder of who you are. And all the words that go with that. We need that to maintain a healthy ranch. And here's what happened. If you don't get that, when that part of you is tapped, you'll suck right back. Because you'll see somebody over here going, I got a blessing for you. Come on over here. And so you're sucked in. And what does that look like? You're sucked back into performing at work. You're sucked back into an improper relationship. You're sucked back in to trying to please people. Why? Because you don't have this internal resource, which is the words of a father or a mother, but I'm particularly speaking of a father, who's actually laying a father's blessing on you. Paul said, there is power in blessing and cursing. It's not neutral. Do you understand that? It is not neutral. There's power in it. Okay, I'm going to say more about that, but what am I saying that's not hitting, or what am I saying that is hitting that you want to ask a question about? Is this communicating at all? Sometimes I wonder, I'm saying something enthusiastically and realize I lapsed into another language. Okay.
People that hurt because they didn't have a father, what would you at this point, I know I do, but what would you at this point say?
What would I do with a person that didn't?
What would you say to them at this point, right now, after having said the Father's blessing is so powerful?
I would say to them, they need to line up. They need to find a place where somebody can lay hands on them and through the power of the Holy Spirit tell them what is true. A couple of you will know this. Not many of you will know this, but I could not tell you how many times I have been in a setting where someone, quote, came to me by night and simply said, would you pray a father's blessing over me? And then they have a story. You know, their dad was there, but he wasn't there, or his dad abandoned them, or their dad physically abused them. And they all of a sudden recognize, I keep getting, do you understand what I'm saying? I keep getting sucked back. Even as I say, I don't want to go, I keep getting sucked back, and now I think you've put words to what is missing. I need a father's blessing. I don't know who else was here, but I always refer to Sally when I did that seminar down at well, I'm practically here, it's not down, but over at Heritage on the father blessing. And some of you remember, it was shocking to me, the response, how many men came. And then the next time I was there, I will never forget saying to some men, how many of you men have never been called into manhood? I'd like to bless your masculinity. If you're interested, you know, thinking, I don't know, how many people would have been there? Do you remember, Sally? A couple hundred? 500 to 600 men? And I thought maybe we'd get, 20 or 30 guys that would be willing. I mean to tell you, when I said, would you like to receive a father blessing? Wow, right down the aisle. And I knew we're going to be here for a while. And I just kept saying, God, give me the word specifically for this person. And what was most shocking of all, I always say this is, the first man that stood in front of me was 83 years old. He was 83 years old. And he basically said, I want free. I want to stop being sucked over to this. See? Because how important that is. I'll give you the thumbnail sketch of this story, but I worked with a man. He was a brilliant man, a very gifted man, who he struggled, and I want to use that word in the best way. He struggled with identity confusion, but not just identity confusion, gender confusion. And he struggled with it. Do you understand? I mean, he was trying to work with it. So I'm in a setting where he is. I'm just kind of doing my thing. And I felt clearly the Lord said this. I want you to pray for that man. Sure, Lord. He said, invite him on your lap. Oh, no. No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. I'll pray for him. Will the rest of you extend a hand? God wouldn't let me up on it. I mean, I went on, talked about other things, and finally I just go, this is a moment where God is not saying, I'm kidding, do it. I just said to the man, I think this might be the Lord, you're free to say no, but I believe I'm to give you a father's blessing, and I just have this need that there's a part of you inside that would love to sit on your father's lap. I could not hardly hold back as he ran and jumped on my lap, put his head on my shoulder, and cried, cried, and cried, and cried, and cried. He was a man not much younger than I am. I just put my hands on him. And I asked the Lord to give me the words that a father that really had eyes wide open would say about him. And I just spoke those words into his life. And who am I? I mean, you guys realize I'm very weird. I mean, I got significant problems. I do. I mean, I really have problems. But God's so anxious to do that. That man, I've seen him years later. When I see him, he always kind of, do you remember that? Yeah, I remember that. But he said that was a tipping point for him. That was a tipping point for him. Yeah, Tom? Oh, absolutely. At the baptism. Right there. What did the Father say? Jesus hadn't accomplished a thing, and he was numbered among the sinners. He wasn't standing up on the bank. He went among the sinners, and it was in the midst of that the Father said, okay, 3 things. You're my son. I love you. I'm going to fill you with my Holy Spirit. Now watch. Okay? I love you. I choose you. I empower you before you've done a thing. Okay? Yeah. And I think this is part of what we're supposed to be doing with one another. I'm being very honest with that. And I'd love to. Go ahead. Okay, well, what I'm going to just speak this for, there's a video being done of some of this, and none of the video's not seeing any of you. What do you do when you have someone, and you've mentioned it's your husband, who's an introvert, who didn't have the Father's blessing, and what was the third one? Lives in isolation. Well, the simple answer, which is obviously going to sound simplistic, is Keep walking on your journey and choosing health because something's going to get taken notice. The other one is pray and get other people to pray. But the other one is treat him and look at him as he is inside. And there's a little boy in there that's still waiting for a father to say, I'm so glad you arrived. The party didn't begin till you got here. And I'm so glad you're here. Okay? And all of a sudden you'll begin to see changes begin to happen. But this, see, am I at all communicating this piece? This is what the church is to be about. And when we become missional without this, we're never going to get there. And when we do get there, it's going to be a story of you got there, but you're an alcoholic, or there's a hidden life that's been exposed. Let's just be vulnerable. We got issues. We can get sucked back. But identity formation is very, very important. We need this to happen. Okay? And you need it over and again, but you know, I was speaking at Mechanicsburg one day, which is out in York, Pennsylvania. And at the end of it, these three women, my wife was with me, these three women, could we talk to you? I said, sure. And I went into another room and they just looked at me and said, would you? I said, I don't, would I what? And then they just said this, would you give us the Father blessing? I was like, me? Well, yeah. But then I pray, Father, let me look at them and let me say what I believe's in your heart for them. Because they want to hear it. And they want to hear it from you, but they want to hear it from flesh. Okay? And so when we think of all this issue of the ranch, you got it? That's the obligation of the parent. That's the obligation of the... And that's why for those of you that have children, get at it. How old do they have to be? Well, if you're 108 and your son is 88, go bless them. Do you follow? You know, Sally's heard me tell this story many times, and Linda was... I'm teaching this to these 500 or 600 men, and right down here, I see a man that's in his 80s start to cry. And he turns to his son seated beside him, and I hear him say this, I'm so sorry. I love you. And the son starts bawling, and he holds his son's hand. His son might have been, 50s. I'm there kind of teaching, caught by this, going, oh my gosh. And then I see the son turn to his son, who's like 21 years old. And he reaches out and he looks at him with tears, and he says, I'm so sorry. I love you. I was like, oh my word, this is the kingdom. This is the kingdom. It's never, ever too late. Do you understand that there's a part of me still waiting for my dad to say I'm a man? Now, I'm grateful God has given it to me. That's why it can flow. But there's a part of me that just goes, it'd have been nice to hear it from you. But now he's reversed roles. So guess what I'm doing? I'm blessing my dad. Okay. All right. Are we okay so far? And by okay, I don't mean, are we? Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, let's listen to the Lord, because maybe the Lord would like us to do a little something about some of this for some people today. Maybe we could support some people, and let's just see, maybe God would want a little bit of identity, integrity by a father blessing. And it doesn't have to be me. It can be, whatever God wants to do. But let me go back now to Nathan's question. So when you articulate this idea as tightly as I have, where does marriage come to play? Okay. Well, one thing we need to know is you don't become one ranch. You do not. Okay? And because you are not one ranch, you still have individual responsibilities. My wife's spiritual life is not my responsibility. I support her in her responsibility. I'm willing, if she invites me in, okay, to in some way maybe give her advice on her responsibility, but she's not my responsibility in that way. It can't work that way. So the question that I don't have time to really fully blow this out is, well, then where do you live? And the answer is, at the barn dance. That's where you live. You get to live your life at the barn dance with the person you love. And what do you do there? You party. You dance. You hug. You go around the corner. You kiss. I mean, that's what we're meant to be doing. But what we're not meant to be doing is judging the other person's spiritual life, judging where they are with identity, trying to go in and fix them. Okay? And when we have that tendency, we need to be able to back up and say, this is saying more about me than it is about them. You know, one of the things that was true in the home I raised in, not only was Mom, she had some issues and it led to some brutality, but it was very early that I realized this. She has determined that everything about me will be a judgment on her. Okay? And so how I dressed, how I acted, my grades, my interests were in her mind a judgment on her. And I faced that so long that by the time I was 12 years old, I just said, that's the end of that. You know, and then I went the other way. I went where? Into isolation, into aggression, into a distance that I maintained from the time I was 12 years old until last July when I brought them here. I would be kind, I would be respectful, I would meet needs, but I couldn't trust it. Okay. So what we have to understand is we still have to maintain our own individuality. That's the best way. Sherry has to have a place. She has to have a hidden life. And I need to support that. I need a place. I need a hidden life. She needs to be able to support that. Okay? And when that happens best, you ought to see what happens when we get to the barn dance. Of course, you never will, but you ought to see it. Okay? Does that make sense to you? And so we have to begin to work on that. Are we okay so far? All right, no questions? Well, let's then go spend a little time looking at what are some of the ways this can go sideways, okay? And what we're going to look at is some now dysfunctional characterizations of a person's identity and what we're calling here a person's ranch. So the first one that I'm going to list here, as you see it, it's nobody's home, okay? Now, by nobody's home, it's not the old, you know, elevator doesn't go to the top floor. That's not what I'm, you know, lights are on, nobody's home. That's not what I'm talking about here. Here's what I am talking about here. What do you notice about the condition of this ranch? It's needing great repair. So the question is, where is this person? And the answer is, off fixing somebody else's ranch. Okay? Off fixing somebody else's ranch. Now, I want to come at this. There are many people, I can't give a percentage, but there are many people in this world that get their identity from fixing others. And some of them even go into fixing professions. And some of us are glad they did go into fixing professions because they're so fastidious at fixing, we're better. But the problem is they're gaining identity through that. You follow? And so, because they get their identity strokes, at this table, what they are is the person that's always ready to help. Who can I help? I need to do this. I need to do that. Okay? They're off fixing somebody else. Now, there are certain types of people that really tend toward this. Individuals that were raised in what could be called crazy-making homes. You know? Where they had to bring some order in order for them to feel any order whatsoever. You know, children of hoarders, children of alcoholics, children of people that are drug addicts, individuals that are dry alcoholics, individuals that are hyper-controlling, aggressive in their childhood. Often the child has to form some way, hear this, to manage their parents. Okay? Now, don't just think that the house is a mess. It could be the subconscious message that is quite intentional, though it is communicated subconsciously, is, you, my child, are responsible to keep me, the parent, in homeostasis. Did you hear that? You, the child, are responsible to keep me in homeostasis. And you know, you don't have to be very old to pick up on that. And so pretty soon you know you're always hyper-vigilant about your parent's mood in order that you can somehow respond to this environment to keep them in homeostasis so you don't go sideways. Am I communicating at all? You getting this? So what happens? That sends an identity message where I would like to have somebody have laid my hand on me and say, you're a wonder to behold, you have something that God loves you, blah, blah, you know, all those wonderful things. The hand was laid, but the hand left a bad imprint, and the hand was, you got to keep us happy. You got to keep us from blowing up. Okay? You got to keep us from making life around here bad. So dance some, perform some, don't get into trouble, and then we'll be okay. But that's your job. And then it can translate into this kind of a response, nobody's home. All right, does anybody have a question? Does the metaphor work for you? Okay, nobody's home because I'm off fixing somebody else. Now let's turn over and let's look at the next one. The next one is the You Tell Me ranch. Now what you'll notice is this ranch is in pretty daggone good repair. But here's the nature of this ranch. The repair on the ranch is determined by what you want me to be. It's the people-pleasing ranch. You follow? I want you to love me. What do you want to be true of my spiritual life? I want you to love me. What do you want me to be true about my gifts and talents? I want you to love me. How do you want me to be relating to others? Do you follow? So I'm always reading how someone of significance wants me to be, and then I seek to be that. Why? Because I want love, I want significance, I want belonging, I want purpose, and so I suck into it. We're sucking into it for good reasons. You do know these are genuine longings. We're just at the wrong doggone table. Yes?
Terry, I see on the Good and Healthy Ranch a snake pit.
Right.
I see the people pleasing. I don't see a snake pit.
That's the point. You see nothing. See, you're not going to reveal. We barely have anything here, maybe a little bit of weeds, but we don't want you to see any of that. Why? Because if you see my snake pits, you're going to reject me. I'm just using that as any illustration of some undone part of you, some ground that you've given, some aspect of your life that isn't fully yet what you need it to be. Okay? Well, I think you're getting it, so I don't want to belabor this point, but let's go to the next ranch. And I wonder if anybody here can relate to the next ranch. Okay? Now you'll notice this ranch has a moat around it. It has a large wall. It has barbed wire on the top. And the only thing that would be added to this is machine guns on each of the four corners. And the nature of this ranch is saying, just stay out. Okay? But I want to be more specific about that. I let people on here and I got brutalized. I let people on here and I was discounted. I let people on here and I was smothered. I let people on here and I was abused. No one is getting on here again. Okay? And so there is no interaction. There is no development. You don't even know what's going on because these individuals give a false front often. By the way, you can have two of these. One is, and I think it's the way I was, I like to go into a room when I was at this phase and not have anybody even think I wanted them to get close. See, I didn't want to give a false impression. Other people, they like the false front, and I'm friendly, but it's like, Beaver Cleaver's house. It only had one side. Everything else was held up by sticks. You follow? It was just a front. And so some people have a front, but you never get behind it. You never really know them. Why? This is, again, about wounding, okay? It's just, I've had enough, okay? My emotions were abused, I was abused, my cares were discounted, my interests were discounted. I'm not letting anybody else on, okay? Now, when I'm at my worst, which there are days, that I'm much more one place than the other, this is where I go. And I just go into isolation, and basically I want to send a signal. Don't even. But now I know that I'm doing that. And I'm going to go, wait a minute, Lord. That's not maturity. Maturity, you don't have to have a wall and a moat and barbed wire. You just need a fence. Even a see-through fence. But a place where you know this is where I end and this is where you begin. Okay? And this is very, very important. The other one is Just Love Me, We'll Build to Suit. I want to turn over to the next ranch. I think we're missing one ranch, but the next ranch says Fix Me. Okay? And this is when you were raised in a relationship where you pretty much were taught you can't, but I'll do it for you. You say, I'll determine things for you. And so you can develop this kind of attitude that my woes in life are because you didn't help me. You didn't fix me. Okay. All right, now just take a moment. Reflect on these ranches. There is another one that I don't have here. I must not have given it to Jeff. It's called the hacienda. And that's when you, out of the longings over here, build a relationship with a dominant person who takes over your ranch and everybody else that's related to them. You know, in a hacienda, there's often like a village that starts, and it's connected. That's what can happen with some people, where they've, out of a longing to be loved, to be cared for, to be made feel safe, they met this man, and he was strong, and he was wealthy, and he was caring, but they didn't know that now that I'm in relationship with him, he's going to determine who my friends are, he's going to determine what I wear, he's going to determine how much time I go wherever. And I would like to say this doesn't happen, but I've worked with these folks. I've worked with a family that the husband was determining. He literally bought a big ranch, and his children, he built them homes on the ranch. He would pay for their education if they did what he wanted them to do. Okay, go ahead, Sandy. Oh, wow. Never thought of that. That's a good point. That would remind me a lot of the shepherding movement that was back in the 70s and early 80s, where there were a lot of churches, I don't know if you understood that they believed in stated authority, and you couldn't marry someone unless the state of authority agreed, and it really got a little bit nasty on that. Now, here's a question I want to ask you. Did I already ask it? Where do you go? See, when you're at your worst, where do you go? And the reason you want to start working on that is it will tell you where the work of identity formation needs to begin to happen, or at least needs to happen. Whether it begins there or not isn't the key point. But, you know, what do I need? You know, do you realize that some people have been so brutalized that they've lost the understanding that they have within themselves some resources to help themselves? And so it's all, you've got to fix me, okay? And I get it. I totally get it. So, but that's no worse than the stay out or the nobody's home or we'll build a suit. It's no worse at all. They're all kind of the same. Can any of you, just think about it. Where do you have a tendency to go? Yeah.
Is it possible to have
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. It is possible, and that's going to be based on, you know, context and to some degree the core longing that's being tapped. Okay. The question is, can you go to more than one ranch? You know, and the answer is absolutely. I'll give you an easy example of that. If safety is tapped, you can go to stay out. If the longing for love is tapped, you could cry out, fix me. You know, here I am. You know, I want loved. So, yes, you can go to more than one ranch at a time. All right, have I lost you? Okay, I could do that very easily. And that's too bad, but you know what's really bad is when I get lost, and I don't know where I am. Then it's really tough. But I want you to just understand a little bit about this, that these investments, what I've called these 6 building blocks of identity integrity, they're important to us, and they're going to be work. But it isn't the work that gives the strength to the identity. The work positions us for Christ to do in us what we can't do in ourselves. See, that's what you want to understand. You don't want to get that list and go, I'm going to do it now, and in 6 months my identity is going to be secure. That's at this table. At this table, it's, wow, I see places where the Lord would like to meet me. Okay? And you can't do them all at once. Sometimes you just have to say, Lord, where do you want to start right now? You've been here for 2 days. I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've been in sessions sometime and I'll go, oh, I need that. Oh, I need that too. And then a little later, oh man, I really need that. And by the time you leave, you go, I'm a mess. But what we want to ask is, Lord, where do you want to begin? Okay. Where is it most important that I invest right now?